And you can see these papal laws, they're still around today, and physically, but also the legacy of these papal bulls and these papal laws is still with us today. And you know, I should have said this at the beginning, but I want to acknowledge there are some amazing people that have guided me in my learnings over recent years around finding out about the doctrine of discovery. Papa Moana Jackson, Steve Newcomb, Deborah Harry, and you know, some of the reflections that have really hit home for me is that this definitely still today extends to our bodies, not just about our lands, but extends to our bodies. And particularly for us as Indigenous peoples, I know we often ask the question, what gives anyone the right? Where does anybody get the right to come and just take our land and be here on behalf as a result of a treaty, but then violate that treaty every day with no consequence? How does that come to be? You know, that there's just such this lack of power, like this incredible power imbalance. And so, you know, honouring the treaty is a recourse for us, but the way in which it's disrespect, the way in which it's nullified still now, in effect by our government, is still very much a legacy of this entitlement that is bound and rooted in the doctrine of discovery. This idea that these European nations had this entitlement and supremacy, that they were superior to us, and that this is what gave them the divine right to do that. So I see it in many different spaces still. Certainly the displacement of wealth that underpins the global economy and places particular countries and systems of power and influence, especially in relation to voting powers in the World Bank, voting powers in the International Monetary Fund, the way in which that regulates poverty, global poverty, or trade deals, global trade deals, all of that also has a whakapapa. Everything has a whakapapa. And so all of that has a whakapapa also back to these rights given out by these papal laws to dispossess and move wealth from this country over to here. Still we see it. The countries of greatest poverty, Africa, are the most resource-rich countries who are still experiencing the greatest poverty, because a huge amount of their resources are being extracted and sent over to nations still under these same kind of forms of entitlement. So, and I mean, we can all kind of go, I think, jam a little bit, and we will a little bit later about how it pops up today, but I wanted to put that down as kind of just the background to what it is that we're talking about tonight. And I'm going to pass it over to our sister Imalani, just to discuss, you know, perhaps how this manifests in her world here in Aotearoa, what she's witnessing this year, and also over in Hawaii. Tēnā tata. Kia ora.
Hanu. I feel like we need a breath. Mai ka moku o ke awe I ka pāki pika a kaua mai ku'u mauna o mauna awa kia, a hiki roa mai ki a aina ka koe huipu mai ne ki alohanui a ka koa pauroa. Hele o mahalo ke ia oko no ka hele ana mai, hele o mahalo ke ia oko ma ke kula nui nei no ka hiki ana ia kako ho I ke huipu I ke ia wahi a hapa I ke kahi maumana o ko'i no ke ia makahiki. O whai noho I ke ia, e noho nei I mua o oko, o wau no o Emalani case no hawa I mai aloha.
Aloha.
Just wanted to say thank you first of all for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for hosting us here at this at this university. My name is Emily Case, and I currently live here in Aotearoa, but I'm from Hawaii. I'm from the island of Hawaii. And I do recognize that it's quite an honor to be sitting here speaking on these topics. I experience and know myself as an Indigenous woman, but I'm very aware of the fact that I'm living on land that I'm not Indigenous to. And with that, I think, comes certain responsibilities. I've done a lot of thinking in the last year, especially after hearing about Tuia 250, about what my role is here as somebody who's not Maori. And what my obligations are to speak out against something that continues to reinforce this colonial narrative. So if we go back to the doctrine of discovery, and I think about things that are happening both in Hawaii and here currently, the doctrine of discovery really is based on certain key assumptions, right? The first being white supremacy, white male Christian supremacy, really. The other being the dehumanization of Indigenous peoples. You can see it on Turtle Island that people were given, the native peoples were said to have the right to occupancy, but not the right to the title of land. In other words, you could occupy a space just like an animal, there's the dehumanization there, but you couldn't own it, you didn't have any rights. So it's based on these real racist assumptions, and they're ongoing, they continue today. The doctrine of discovery isn't something that we can talk about in the past tense, neither is colonialism, right? Because it's still ongoing. Tuia 250 is an example of that. So I think in terms, I just came from Hawaii. Literally just landed last night, so the Mauna and Mauna Kea, where I'm from, is always quite heavy on my heart. But if I could just bring a little bit from home into this conversation, just to show how the doctrine of discovery and these assumptions continue to manifest there and here, yeah, I'd like to perhaps just bring some of that out. One thing I should note is that the doctrine of discovery really laid the ideological foundation for settler colonialism, right? And Aotearoa and Hawaii are both settler colonies. We have both experienced what it feels like to have the colonizer come in, not just to exploit your land, but to come in and stay, right? Come in and settle down. And in order to settle, they need to move you out of the way and disappear you and erase you. And there are all kinds of logics, right? Settler colonial logics of erasure or elimination. And again, they're still ongoing today. And that's why, like if I think about Tuia 250 and the mere proposal that we can talk about colonialism in the past tense is so problematic because it's still going on. But anyway, so I just have to say that in terms of Mauna Kea, I don't know how familiar you are with what's happening right now at home, but we are currently standing to protect our most sacred Mauna Kea, from the construction of a 30-meter telescope on the summit. And that is often framed as an argument of culture versus science. We are not anti-science. We are pro-protecting our land, pro-protecting our akua, our gods, pro-protecting our right to be Indigenous in our space. And that whole framing of culture versus science is a way to completely ignore the fact that this is a settler colonial issue, that is still premised on the idea that we are less than, that it is okay for someone to come in and build a telescope that will be 18 stories high, that will cover 5 acres of land, that will dig 2 stories into the ground and include huge 5,000-gallon tanks to hold human waste and chemical waste on the place of our akua. The mere suggestion that that is a possibility is an impact of settler colonialism and the doctrine of discovery that dehumanizes us and makes us seem like less than. So whenever people try to say, you know, we get this all the time in Hawaii, why don't you guys just get over it already? And I'm like, I can't get over something I'm currently still living, right? We are currently living with the impacts of this every single day, and I can't get over it unless we're gonna have some real change. Just to give you this is a devastating example, but the mayor of Hawaii Island, my mayor, Mayor Harry Kim, I'm just gonna put his name out there. Back earlier this year in March, he was at a Mauna Kea Management Forum meeting. This was a meeting for people who are pro-TMT and anti-TMT. He is very pro-TMT. And this was a meeting to discuss the management, or I should say mismanagement, of the mountain. And he said, and this is so like just settler colonialism logic at its best. He said, talking to scientists, you know, there are people who view this mountain as part of their soul. If you're going to trample a people's soul, all I ask is that you do it with care, with caution, and above all, compassion. So that idea that you can even suggest that it's okay to trample on a people's soul is not only ridiculous to me, but it relies upon the dehumanization, again, of indigenous people. And what he essentially did there is he tried to equate us with nature. And you know, from a very Western perspective, nature is here to exploit and to get profits from, right? So nature is something to conquer. From a very Native Hawaiian perspective, from an indigenous perspective, nature is relative. Nature is actually superior to us. We have a proverb in Hawaii that says, "He kaina, he kawa, he kanaka." The land and the environment is chief, we are its servant. So we know that our responsibility is to protect it always. But what he did is he tried to equate us, sorry, I talk with my hands, I'm just having trouble here. He tried to make us as if we were nature so that he could justify stomping on us just like they do the land. But that doesn't work in an indigenous worldview, right? But again, his whole logic and the fact that he said that and thought that it was okay, and that people also thought that was okay, is just proof that settler colonialism logics and the doctrine of discovery and the assumptions that it promotes are alive and well today, right? So I just feel like I'm ranting about Mauna Kea, I'm sorry. But you know, the whole goal of settler colonialism is to come in and settle, as I said earlier. So what we need to do, and what we're doing here, is shaking that up. We can never allow the settler colonial state to settle. You have to keep exposing it, right? Stripping it apart, dismantling it. And that's precisely what we're doing on the Mauna. Every day that we sit there at the base of the Mauna and insist that the state listen to us and recognize us is another day spent not allowing the settler colonial state to sit there and settle and further entrench itself into our land and into our history. And that's why these kinds of conversations are so necessary here, because that is Tuia 250. Tuia 250 is the settler state's attempt to celebrate itself, right? And to continue to kind of make you believe that it's a normal presence here, right? That the settler colonial state is a given, but it isn't a given, right? And so we have to keep questioning it and calling it out. And so when I talked about earlier, you know, my coming from someplace else and trying to examine my own responsibilities here, I know the weight and the heaviness of settler colonialism because I live it every day in Hawaii. I know what it's like to be continuously pushed to the side, to have your language and your values stomped on constantly, right? And I'm looking at my Hawaiian friend over there because we know it. But I also know that people here know that as well. So I come here and I think, well, Amalani, you cannot be part of the problem. Instead, you have to figure out how you can continually call settler colonialism out and encourage other non-Maori to do the same. So, I think I presented a paper earlier this year at NISA, and I think if I could perhaps bring something unique from Hawaii to offer to perhaps use as a metaphor for dismantling settler colonialism. You know, we had a very unique interaction with Captain Cook in Hawaii. So, February 14th, 1779, 10 years after coming here.